Welcome to Beyond Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Petrellis, and we are so excited for today's guest. But before we jump into today's guest, I want to give a huge shout out to Wilmington High School. We were down at the Wilmington Billerica football game Friday night at Wilmington High School, and what an experience. I mean, talk about a cool high school to go to. It's a really nice high school. When you pull up there, it's like state-of-the-art, beautiful fields. But, you know, they support their football team, and the whole town was there. I mean, the band was unbelievable. The cheerleaders were great. The team played really tough. I mean, some big kids. The crowd, they had, you know, a whole corner of the stands in the crowd. They were going crazy. We were able to get up there. Incredible pizza Mia was very good. So an overall really fun experience there. So we just want to thank Wilmington High School. And back to our guest here. You know, I've been following this guest for quite a while on Twitter, and I just think, you know, really says some cool things, retweets a lot of cool things. And the more I learned about this coach, particularly through guests that we've had on this show, the more I just became intrigued to reach out and ask him to come on, and it's our honor. So I'm going to read a little bit of a list here. This coach has done quite a few things over his career, very impressive, and we're going to touch upon a little bit of everything today. The founder of BST Basketball Training. Rick was also the founder of the director of the New England Storm basketball, established a Merrimack Youth Valley League, and served as president for 10 years from 04 to 14. Was also co-chairs the Commonwealth Motors Christmas Classic, and you know, ran the North Andover Boosters Club from 88 to 2000. So I'm really interested in picking his brain about that as being a coach and running the Boosters. And is currently the executive director of the North Andover Youth and Recreation Services, and been doing that role since 1988. So just an extremely impressive. Runs the North Andover Fall Ball League, which, if people don't know about that league, it's considered one of the best fall ball leagues, not just in Massachusetts but in New England. I mean, it's a highly regarded league, and like I said, we're just really honored to have our coach on today. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Rick Gorman.
Thanks a lot, Coach. Glad to be on. A big fan of your podcast. I actually are friendly with a number of guests you've had, but I've also been interested in hearing about coaches from other sports. As a coach in basketball, I've learned a lot of great things from football coaches, baseball coaches, and things like that. So I've kind of really enjoyed all of your guests, and obviously knowing Kristen and Dennis Ingram and Chris Harvey, who have been on your show, obviously part of my big network of basketball. So you're doing something really good, and I'm humbled that you actually asked me to come on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, you just named some really good people. And like I said, the basketball world is just so connected, especially in Massachusetts. That's something that this podcast has really opened my eyes to, is just how many coaches know each other across the state at all different levels and all different divisions and conferences. It's unbelievable. The world of high school basketball in this state just intrigues me so much. So I can't wait to even pick your brain a little bit more. And we'll jump into it. I mean, realistically, you know, the first thing that I mentioned is your BST basketball training. And what I looked on your website, and, you know, it seems like you really kind of hone in on developing skills that maybe aren't developed, you know, in an hour and 15-minute practice, say at a youth level or even at a high school level. So talk about your training facility a little bit, what you guys, you know, focus in on, and maybe your staff a little bit, who you have on board with you.
Yeah, I've been really lucky. BSD training started as an offshoot of the New England Storm, which I had been running, and it was really my passion was not running AAU. My passion was actually training basketball players, and I've been fortunate to train kids as young as 5 years old, all the way up to pros, and guys that have played high-level college basketball. So we started off real small, basically working out, you know, my son and his friends, and at that point, you know, obviously, and to this day, the greatest player we've ever trained is Georges Niang from the Philadelphia 76ers. George has been very thankful for what we've done for him. But we've had an opportunity to train lots of different level players. And I think what sets us off differently, so I have a real strong feeling about trainers to begin with. And I do know there are some tremendous trainers out there. A lot of young guys and young women that are getting into it that are really good at it. But there are equally some really bad trainers, people that are looking to hang a shingle, say they're a basketball trainer, and half of them use things like, you know, NBA trainer or something like that, and they've never even trained anybody in high school. And a lot of it is gimmicky, right? They bring all their little toys, and watching one guy outside a couple of weeks ago, and he had all his cones and all his medicine balls and things like that. And quite frankly, it was a bit of a joke. Like the kid, he wasn't really training them in basketball. So that's really where my passion is. I think the difference of how we train is we really focus on training kids how to play basketball. How you move without the ball, obviously how you shoot, efficiency, all different areas that we're not trying to teach a high school kid a step back Jason Tatum. And the reason is they're not Jason Tatum.
Right.
And that's a move that they're not going to make in high school. They're not going to be able, they're not good enough to make a move like that. So we try to really simplify and really go at things that kids need to learn how to play, to be functional high school basketball players. And luckily for many of them to go on to play at the college level. And we train mostly Division III college basketball players, but we've had a share of Division I players, Division II players. As I said, we've had George in the gym. We've had, Tyler Nelson, who's playing in Europe right now. We've had about 7 Division I basketball. So we've had all different levels, and we train them all the same way. And it's a lot on in terms of ball handling. I see these crazy, videos of everybody doing 9,000 stationary ball handling drills where we're not going to spend any time on stationary ball handling because people shouldn't be paying me to do that. They can do that on their own at their house. So we're training kids how to move, how to space the floor, how to pass the ball. And we're just doing lots of things around decision making. And I think that's what the difference with us is. Not many people, there are some good ones out there. We're making a lot on embracing, teaching kids how to make decisions and embracing making mistakes. We call them barn mistakes. We want kids to make mistakes when they train with us so they won't make mistakes in the wintertime. So we have a lot of like really dealing with some Socratic methods, like we don't tell the kids what they did wrong. We kind of ask the kids, so what could you have done differently, or what that type of thing. So,
Which is great, which is equally, because sometimes it's how you're really going to get in a kid's mind, because if you're blowing up or getting explosive with the kid or showing that you're frustrated that they did something wrong, then they're going to hesitate in what they saw and what they were thinking. They're going to try to say what you think they want you to hear, right? So doing it
exactly.
that way is kind of being like, all right, let me get in their mindset a little bit to kind of see why they did what they did.
And we're trying to get kids to not be robots. Like they got to figure out the game. Like they can't be coached every 2 seconds. We do a lot less, we call it teaching on the fly. Like we'll make a comment like, oh, let's do this, and we get back to it. We're not lecturing kids. And I think the biggest thing for us is we develop a relationship with players that only a few trainers and organizations have success at. Like for us, the biggest thing is I'm very involved with the mind aspect, like people's mindset, their mental toughness, how to really deal with this stuff. And those are some of the things we work with. But every kid that's ever trained for us, comes back and, obviously thanks us and, really talks about what we're done. So, we may not have the greatest kids in a gym. There may be a gym that has even more famous people or whatever, but we're training all types of kids to be the best that they possibly can be. And for some of those kids, it may be just making the JV high school team. And for other kids, it's to be a great varsity player. And then for other kids, it's to play at the next level, and whatever that level may be, whether it's junior college, community college, D1, D2, D3. And then obviously we've been fortunate to be around 7 pros that have actually come through our gym. So that's exciting too. So it's a great program we do. I am the figurehead of it, but I have 2 wonderful young guys, which they will eventually take this over for me as I get on in years and probably can't, use a pad on the gym floor and everything else. But Steve Boudreau, who's the head coach at Tewksbury High School, he's actually trained. He's worked with me since he basically got out of college.
So how do you go about choosing staff? I mean, you've been doing it for so long, right? So, I mean, get from a coaching mindset, right? Like, are you just kind of looking to bring basketball guys in? Is it kids that have actually trained through this program? I mean, how do you go about, I guess, looking at your staff while you're jumping into
It's a great question, because the reason we're successful is the people that I'm around. So like a Steve Boudreau, I've known since he was, a kid growing up at my youth center, and he kind of falls into my culture. He knows how to build relationships. And Matt Medeiros was a kid that played against my son in college up at St. Joe's in Maine. And I just watched how he kind of played the game and everything else. And when he came to live in basically Andover. I hooked up with him and brought him in as a young guy, and he's kind of our shooting expert. He does a lot with game. Like, we don't just sit and take shots, what we call block shooting. We're doing game action. So we'll tell kids, how to come off a curl, a fade, how to move without the ball and catching your footwork and shooting. And he does a lot of that. And then I got a little bit more of an old time that we just started now. John Pagnetti, who had a phenomenal career at UMass Lowell, and he's been being a youth coach for a number of years, and he's in the gym with us now. So it's all people that I'm looking for that can relate to kids, that can hold kids accountable. We're not there to kiss anybody's ass. We're trying to make kids better. But the biggest thing is we always have this thing like, you can't yell at a kid until they know you love them. And our whole thing is we build the relationship so then we can put a boot up their butt if they've got or whatever. So I'm looking for it, just because you played the game doesn't mean I see a bunch of guys that played high level basketball that are horrible trainers. They don't know how to train because they don't know how to have relationships with kids. Like, they were great basketball players. Then I've seen some guys, whether it's the Lawrence Frank syndrome, where never played basketball in the whole life, was just a student of the game, wanted to be a coach, and just became better and better at the game and could relate to people. So I don't hire a lot of people. I've got my own small select group, but those are the things I'm looking for with training in our program.
Yeah, and I mean, even in the professional game today, I feel like players want to play for ex-players. I mean, that seems to be the consensus in the league nowadays as well. So, just like your training, you're going to want people in there that have been through it, that understand it, that understand you, like, theoretically, and what your thoughts and processes and so on. So I was just curious. Yeah, that's really interesting.
It's also a respect level. So take Matt Medeiros, for example, who was a 1,200 point scorer in college. When he does a lot of our shooting stuff and he shows how to do it and he goes 9 for 10 for 3, the kids look at him.
Yeah, like, they light up. Yeah.
And I laugh because John Pagnetti, he's in his late 50s now, and he'll tell you he's not the same size he was when he was in college. And the kids look at him as like, it's this big older guy. But when they actually watch him demonstrate stuff, there's instant respect because those guys did play at a high level.
Yeah, and it's cool. Like you said, they just seeing someone who's kind of been there and done it, I think just kind of gives that extra oomph to what it is that you're trying to get out there and show.
Sure.
And what's really cool is, like, obviously I just learned that about you and through our pre-phone and obviously doing research, but what made me find you really was kind of the fireside chats. I mean, you started that very similarly to when I started this podcast during the pandemic, when a lot of people weren't necessarily, having anything else to do, and it was an opportunity to be able to educate and so on. And I know, like, Dennis Ingram, we mentioned, had on here, Kristen McDonald, Chris Harvey, guests that were on here. I know they're frequents of your Wednesday night on Twitter. Give you an opportunity to kind of plug that a little bit as far as what you do. I think it's a great resource. If I was a basketball guy, I'd probably be attending every Wednesday as well. So go ahead, I'll give you opportunity.
Yeah, thanks. Believe it or not, it evolved during the pandemic, but it actually started 12 years ago. It was myself and a guy named Hank Smith, who was at that time the head coach at Emerson College. He lived in North Andover, and we would just get together at his house, in the park, in a gym, at my office, and we would bring, one or two guys in, and we would just talk hoops. We would move the salt and pepper shakers around the table. And we always kind of built it after FDR's fireside chat. That's where the name came from. So we had been doing that for many, many years. And then when the pandemic hit, and all of us were on Zoom, right? I don't know if I was ever on Zoom before the pandemic, but I've been, as you are too, you become an expert on Zoom. So I saw this opportunity to say, okay, we can't get out. People aren't doing anything. People want to really get involved with professional development. And there were other people, Layson Perkins and, Chris Oliver for Basketball Immersion, doing a lot of these type of things. And I said, okay, let me take my fireside chat. We'll go virtual. And over the last year and a half of the pandemic, we met every Wednesday night. And then we actually took 2 months off last year in that shortened basketball season. And then we came back in the spring, and we actually went up to the end of August. And then we're taking a little bit of a break because I'm doing this fall league right now, but we're going to get back. But there's 137 coaches, high school and college, and pro coaches that have actually been on the fireside. And every week we either have a topic that we all want to discuss, or we bring in guest speakers. And we've had some phenomenal guest speakers. And that's actually how I met Kristen McDonald. Like, I knew Kristen from afar. Like, I'm impressed. She's one of the best coaches in the state. And I saw what she did in Braintree. And then I saw when she took over the Norwood Boys program, I was pumped. Because I'm a strong believer. I'm a Becky Hammond fan. I think there's a ton of women out there that can coach in the men's game. And I had known Hav for many years, and I started to get Dennis Ingram. So we just got people, and there was probably an average of 30 a week. And there were the psychos like me, Kristen, Steve Woodrow, that we went every week. And there were other guys and women, and we had a mixture, by the way. We had about 10 females have joined the fireside chat. And it's actually gone on a whole unbelievable level. Like, we've had people from across the country chime in. One of our last ones, we had an assistant coach at the University of South Carolina who had heard about it. He came in and presented. We got Greg White from Arkansas was on it, and just some phenomenal people. Like Chris Oliver, spent his own time. He's got his own big thing, and he came on as a guest speaker. And it just has grown and grown and grown, to the point where it's crazy. We're going to be coming up on 500 firesides since we started, 12 years ago. But literally in the last year and a half, we probably had 50 because we've kind of got together almost every week. So it's a great thing. I've taken it to a different level. Best thing about it, it's free to these people. Myself and my assistant, Steve Woodrow, we kind of do all the work, but it's a passion. We're actually not looking to make money off of it or anything. It's what a lot of coaches will describe. And this is the best thing that I feel about when people say to me, it's the best professional basketball development that they have been part of. And that's actually what I want to see. And the people that aren't on it, the first thing I got to say to you is why. Like, you got to get on here. And one of the things I tell the coaches all the time is, you tell your players to do all this in the off season, get better, be a better shooter, be a better ball handler, be able to take people off the dribble. Well, what are you as a coach doing to get better? Or are you just taking the year off and, recuperate till the next season? Like, you got to get fresh. The game is changing constantly.
Nonstop.
And I think one of the best things is we're sharing the game, and that's our biggest thing. We're sharing the game, and we're connecting people who never knew each other before. I mentioned, like, I didn't know Kristen before this. But the reality is we're all friends now, and we networked. I'm seeing coaches connecting with each other to plan scrimmages, picking each other's brain on certain things that they're more of an expert. And that is the ultimate feather in the cap of what I tried to build with this, was this whole networking thing. And to your initial point when you started this, the basketball networking in Massachusetts, and I don't know about the other sports, so it may be as good, but in basketball, it is phenomenal. The days of like, oh, I can't talk to another coach because he might steal my super play, that's not happening anymore. Like, we're sharing, we're learning, we're trying to grow with each other, and it's an awesome thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say, like, in football, just because that's my world. I mean, it is a very good network, but basketball is just different. Like, it's different. And everyone knows each other. In football, everyone's willing to share and willing to be a part of things and willing to educate or be educated. But in basketball, it's just people know each other a little bit more personally. They've gone each other, and maybe that's because there's so many realms of basketball with AAU now, and there's so many different leagues and tournaments and everything else that people just kind of cross through and meet each other maybe a little bit easily. I don't know, and football doesn't have that as much, but it's a really coolly connected world. And I feel like I've been a part of it for a long time, even though it's only been about a year since I really started talking to hoop coaches. And to your point with the PD, I mean, that's what this podcast to me is all about, is that you can come on and listen to a coach of any sport and really listen to how they do things, where their success is or isn't, or maybe some things that they hold very valuable you didn't really think twice about in your program. And now it gets the wheels in your brain spinning a little bit as far as, let me try this, or let me educate myself in that way. So I think that's cool that you have that as well.
We use the word curiosity, like being curious. Like, I want to know what other people, like, none of us ever invented the game of basketball. We're all robbers. We've stolen things or whatever, but I want to know why Kristen does this or why Paul Conley does this. And then I look at other stuff. Like, our football team, which I think is a pretty good football team in North Andover, they go to Marblehead and get spanked Friday night, 44-8. And Marblehead, I find out, has one of the second largest, longest winning streaks. And I'm intrigued. Like, I want to call up this football coach. Marblehead is not a big town. And football, when you're not a big town, football's a tough sport to be probably really good at. And he's obviously got something going there because they punched us in the face on Friday night. I watched the game. But obviously, I want to pick his brain. Like, how did he get toughness with his kids? What's the culture there? And I think that's what you want to be. You want to be curious. I have tennis people that'll call me up and say, what are you doing with this mindset or something like that? So I just think the more we can share, and even like the best coaches learn from other coaches outside of their discipline. So like, I'm intrigued by you. You're a football coach, like, and you've had success, and you've got obviously a different situation, raising two kids right now, but you've got a passion for football. And I'm like, well, I got to pick his brain on certain things. So that's what I think we do. We all got to work together, and all of us can be better.
Yeah, I mean, that's like, I used this example before, but like in the NBA, like Eric Spoelstra was at the University of Oregon, like talking about spread offense and like trying to implement some of those, ideas or, I guess, concepts of, implement them in the game of basketball, which I think is kind of crazy. But like you said, it's part of picking the brain and understanding spacing and open areas and, what you look for. I mean, you have a good point guard that's essentially a quarterback. So it's really understanding maybe where the lanes are, where the gaps are going to be, and so on. I'll ask you this question because I don't think I can ask too many coaches like at the high school level this, because they have people to answer to when they walk over here, where you might not necessarily, but in those fireside chats, especially with your high school coaches. And I want to ask this question correctly. I don't want to ask it incorrectly, but do you feel like high school coaching, specifically head high school coaches in any sport, do you feel like it's a little tougher to get into over the last few years because of parents? And what I mean is that, it seems like nowadays all you hear is a story about a program and the parents getting involved and head coaches losing their job, or it becomes a big thing on social media. Do you think when you talk to these coaches or just high school coaches that you've worked with in general, do you find that it's hard to get some of those really good head coaches or head coaching candidates to become head coaches at the high school level because of that?
Yeah, I think it's very different. And I can speak freely on this because, one, I'm not a high school coach.
Right. That's
I
why I'm
actually
asking.
coach
That's why I'm
programs.
asking.
I don't report to an athletic director. And I got a mantra of KIR. I keep it real. When you get to be my age, you got to reflect back when you were in high school yourself. And when I was in high school, graduating in 1980, my parents would have done nothing but sit in the stands. And if I ever bitched about the coach, they'd probably tell me, just shut your mouth or go talk to your coach. I think things have changed. I think kids have changed. What I worry about, and it's not just people going into high school coaching, I'm worrying about losing talented coaches that are already there. I know we talked about Kristen's situation. Like, if Kristen McDonald had ever quit coaching basketball, that would be a loss for the game, not the girls' game, not the boys' game, the game. And I see a lot of young coaches that it's becoming less about basketball and it's becoming more about keeping everybody happy. And I think there's a place for parent involvement. I really do. But, you can't micromanage this. You can't tell you have to deal with some reality as a parent. Is your kid good enough? Okay. He's not playing because maybe he's not good enough. And those are some of the things where I think it's really tough when you spend most of your time dealing with parent complaints. And not all parents are like that. A lot of parents are just great. But I think it's tough. And as a game, and I don't think this is just basketball, by the way, because I'm hearing about it across the board. Like, is it worth the aggravation of dealing with all of these other things when I just want to coach the game? Now, on the flip side, there are some coaches that got to get their act together. Like, they've got to put out a good product. They have to build relationships, which is one of my biggest problems. Is if you're a coach that's not building relationships with the kids, I don't know if you really should be coaching. Like, you've got to meet that. So it's not, sometimes these parent complaints are actually real complaints. But I know the ones that work. And remember, they're making what, $5,000, and they're basically working the entire year. They're doing everything. They're not doing it for the money. They're doing it for the love. And when we kind of make it really hard for them, like every probably month, I hear of a new coach that's leaving the game. And, Danny Ventura is one of the greatest things that's ever happened to high school sports, the way he promotes high school sports and promotes kids and stuff. But Danny's usually the first that'll have some information about a coach that's leaving. And you find out between the lines that they're not leaving because they're retiring. They're leaving because it's just getting to be too hard with all the other things. And I think we as a society need to take a serious look at being a little more realistic of what we can do with sports and what we can't. There's got to be a little bit of give and take on both sides. But yeah, I hear a lot of coaches saying, I'm not going into, I know a talented young coach that wants nothing to do with it because of the parents. So what he's choosing to do is to be like a freshman JV coach, because you don't really get a lot of problems when you're the freshman JV coach. It's the head coach. And that's too bad, because he's head coach material by far.
Yeah, and that's what I've always found. I mean, in the game of football, I've been around it. I was around it for 15 years, and I would say more towards the end of my tenure, there was a lot more parent involvement with the athletic director and contacting them in the school, and it's unfair. And and I see that and I hear that, like you said, you hear it in the world of basketball. I mean, I hear it in the world of football almost on a daily basis. So, just curious about your opinion about that topic. I know that's contested, and like you said, it goes back and forth. I mean, there is a responsibility of sometimes coaches aren't putting the work in. And I think, you have to say to yourself, as a parent, just like you have everything going on daily in your life, I mean, coaches on top of it have their full-time jobs, and they have, their family to balance and their life to balance and their health to balance, whether that's physical health or mental health. So there's a lot on the coaches. And I think that, sometimes that type of stress can make the job more difficult. And like you said, just not an attractive job at the end of the day to want to take.
No, because they're not doing it for the money. But listen, kudos to the ADs that have their coaches back. And on the fireside chat, I get a mixed bag on that. I hear, Paul Conley talk about his AD, and I talk, somebody else will talk about an AD that doesn't really have the back. Like, I think, principals and ADs, do your homework before you start thinking it's always the coach. And I don't think parents should have total access to an athletic department. First of all, they shouldn't be choosing who's on the team, who's playing what time. Like, you never question playing time. That was always the thing when I coached with parents. I told them right up front, you can talk to me about how I'm treating your kid, how your kid's mental health is, but don't talk to me about playing time. I mean, that's my job. I'm going to decide who plays and who doesn't play and when they play. So I do think there's a lot of ADs out there that are outstanding, and there's a few ADs out there that probably got to, grow a little bit of a spine on this. So I'm hoping we do some work on it, because it would be a real shame if we continue to lose coaches on all levels.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, too, it's like me going to as a coach, going to a parent's job and criticizing them on their job of, if they're a dentist, like, oh, you're hitting their gums too much, they're bleeding. I mean, you got to do better. Like, anyone could be highly critical of anybody at their job, especially when you're kind of sitting back and not dealing with the pressures of keeping an eye on everything. I mean, people are just watching the game, but realize that head coaches are watching the game and taking care of kids outside, whether it's because of classes or discipline or training or, their academics, whatever it is. The coach has a lot on their plate just besides the game of basketball itself, or any sport for that matter that we're talking about.
Absolutely.
One really awesome thing too that I wanted to touch base with you on, just because I live in Wilmington, and I read in the Boston Globe, during just these past winter, Wilmington had a stoppage in sports, because of COVID. And you do these culture building workshops, and I know that you've done them before the pandemic, but obviously I think with the pandemic they've kind of blown up and taken off for you even more so. But it was just an interesting article that I read, that you basically come in and work with the program, and I'll let you go into more detail about it, but you come in and work with the program, and basically not necessarily just chalkboard X's and O's, like really learning about yourselves as a team, as people, and even maybe as coaches, talking about how you run your program and things that you're maybe not necessarily looking at, that after this workshop become even more valuable in how you run your program down the line. So just wanted to give you the opportunity to maybe chit chat about that a little bit as well.
Yeah, so I've been doing these culture team building workshops for about 7 years, and it actually was an offshoot of what I do full time for my job in North Andover, where I do a lot of like building culture and leadership with young kids or whatever. So obviously I had a passion for basketball, basketball. So as another offshoot of what we do with BST training, we turned it into some college workshop. And this is something I do by myself. The rest of my guys don't work with me on this. And a lot of it is my expertise on that. So, I would go into a program, my first program I did many, many years ago with Merrimack College. Bert Hamill brought me in and we did some team building stuff and we did a team dinner and he had some issues. We had two captains that were really kind of not on the same page and it was affecting the rest of the team. So we did kind of brought them together and it was really good. The team actually ended up making the NE10 playoffs this year. And I'm not saying I had everything to do with that, but I do think we had something to clear the year and we did that. So I do a lot with high school, Newburyport High School, I've got North Andover, I've done a number of different schools. But last year, with the pandemic, as part of my full-time job in North Andover, I have been preaching that we are not thinking enough about the mental health of our kids, what the pandemic's done. And again, the pandemic has screwed up everybody's mental health. But I'm a kid. I work with kids all the time. I'm a kid-centric person. So I was really talking about with kids. I saw so much more anxiety and things like that. And I said, this is the year we need to do those team building workshops even more. So last year I did more than I ever had. And I actually branched off into doing not just boys team, I did girls team. And Jess Robinson from Wilmington is actually who I actually hooked up with to do the first girls program we did, the Wilmington girls. It was a team that, had come off a successful team the year before.
Yeah, they were 17-6 from what I read. Yeah.
And they had an absolute stud, a really good player that was back. But I was blown away. I think during the course of the year, they had stoppages of like 3 times. Yeah. So when their first stoppage came up, coach contacted me and said, would you be willing to, do a culture workshop for us? And do you do girls? And I said, absolutely. But because of the stoppage, we couldn't even do it at Wilmington High School. So we did it at a dance studio. And basically what these culture work, team building workshop is I meet with the coach ahead of time. What are your issues? What are your concerns? What are you looking to do with your team this year? And it's non-negotiable. It's not just with the kids. If the coaches are not going to be part of the training, then I don't do the training.
That's great. That's really smart, because, yeah.
And I'll tell you, coaches got to expose themselves a little bit. And basically, we would talk about what they need to work on. And then I have a number of different activities that I actually do to kind of promote team building and stuff like that. And then we focus on a lot of the things that may be going on. And we get the kids talking. And it gets pretty emotional. We have groups that break down in tears talking about different things. Last year, one of the things we talked about was, what is your why? Like, why do you play the sport? And, you expect the usual answers, because I love the game. I love the game. Well, I'm playing for my grandparents, who I haven't seen in a year because of the pandemic, and they helped raise me. And then breaking down crying. I'm doing it for my father, who died, and he was my only coach that I ever had, and I'm trying to live. There would be a lot of personal stuff that kids would break down, and to see the kids rally around each other. Dave Clay, as a coach at Newburyport, actually kind of revealed something about himself to his kids that the kids never knew about him. And it was pretty emotional. And what you do is you kind of get really connected. And then after this 3 or 4 hours is over, I keep in touch with the coach, I follow them, but then I come back mid-season for 3 or 4 hours. Smart. And we basically reevaluate. So what worked? What didn't work? What were some of the problem areas that continue to exist? Which ones are really good? And then sometimes I've actually gone back a third time for a couple of programs that are really struggling. I've gotten nothing but rave reviews. I'm really thankful. The Boston Globe did a nice article on one that I did at Tewksbury last year, and I got some good exposure for that. One of my favorite groups was I did Reggie Hobbs' Lexington team, and it was Lexington is a Metco school, right? So their team was made up of a number of kids, more on the wealthy side that live in Lexington. They have Metco kids from Boston. So it was a lot of more African-American boys that go to Lexington High but actually live in Boston. And there was connections. And, we had to get to some stuff, little stuff around race. We had to get, acceptance, diversity, and things like that. And it was phenomenal. And the Lexington kids, they were phenomenal to work with. Great kids. They're in my fall league now. And I kind of I kind of look at them and say, I think they got a lot out of what we did. So we're going to continue it this year. We're starting to branch off to some other sports. Cara Malillo from Reading Girls program has contacted me about also doing her softball team. So there's some of the things we're going to do. I think it's a necessity. I think, and it's not just me. There are a lot of great people that can do this, but it can't be the coach that can't do it. It's got to be someone that's not connected to the team that can really pull stuff out. We got to have coaches that take risks themselves. And we bring food into it. There's lots of things of sharing and stuff. But I know it's working because each one of these coaches have kids write me letters about what the experience was. The coaches never read the stuff. They just send it to me, and it's pretty powerful stuff. And this is my thing about, if you're going to be a coach, you need to have relationships with kids. You need to be willing to make relationships. If you're just coming to run the latest offense and demand kids to play defense, then you're not going to have a successful team.
They're not going to play hard for you. They're not going to play hard for you. They see it. They know it.
No.
They get it,
When I coached, one of the biggest compliments I would get is from a parent saying, like, those kids would go through a wall for you. And they would, because I built a relationship with them. So that's something that I want to do a lot more with coaches. Almost take the training into some coach training on what you need to do. So I'm branching out. I've actually been reached out by a couple of colleges. So that's a step up. Heading up to Maine and Thanksgiving to Coney High School. I'm going to be going up there to our guy TJ Mains's program. So we're taking this thing on the road a little bit. And I think eventually I have to bring on some people that can also do what I do, because I think it's a growing thing. It's not a huge expense, but it's money well spent for the teams that have actually taken this.
Well, I'll tell you two things. One, we'll talk after the show because we love to help you out. We make fun videos, and we can, if you send us pictures or videos of people, what you're doing, kids that you're talking to, we can put something together for you. Because I think, going to my second point here, like, when I took over as a head coach, the first thing was all about building culture at the school. It was all about making kids like buy into the weight room and buy into off-season training and buy into being a football player and what that means. And, a lot of times that's the most important thing to start off building. It's not necessarily winning games. It's about building a culture that kids care about each other and love each other. And to your point of, really investing in your players, I mean, I would be as tough as any kid, but I'd be texting them and saying, hey, how was your quiz? I forgot to ask you practice day. How'd you do in that quiz? Or, how's your dad feeling? Or how's your mom feeling? Or, if they had somebody who was sick in the family or something going on, because the kids play hard for you when they realize that you care about them. And I think as a coach, there's so much of win, 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 win. And there's not as much nowadays of, because coaches are feeling that pressure to win, and not so much nowadays is like really investing in your players as far as how life goes outside of there. And I think for young coaches, it's so important to hear, because yep, you might be the smartest person and know and understand concepts and put your team in the situations to win. But if your kids don't love you and they're not buying into you, like, that's only going to get you so far till there's another team who can do the same exact thing, but they just play with a little bit more passion and maybe a little bit more mental toughness and things that, you don't get out of your kids when they're not totally bought into you. So I totally agree with you, Coach. I think that's a great point. And it's any sport. It's any sport, really. Let me ask you this, and these are some questions I'll kind of just ask you off the cusp just a little bit, but the game of basketball has changed so much. And, every basketball coach I talk to, it's about the three ball, the three ball, the three ball. So I'm going to ask you this question a little differently. I guess besides the three-pointer, that's kind of changed the game over the last, 5 to 10 years. What's another aspect of the game that's changed that maybe an average fan like myself who just watches, the ball going up and down the court, both ways, maybe a guy like you and your expertise, what's something you've noticed that's changed about the game working with these kids and helping them evolve to play it?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things. What I love about basketball, it's constantly evolving. And again, this may be true with all sports. I'm just not an expert like I am on basketball. So we're in a interesting thing that we're all running with pretty much analytics driven. 3 points is worth more than 2 points, etc. And there's a place for it because the three is an absolute weapon. And then we can talk about whether the line should be a little bit farther out or et cetera. But it is an absolute weapon at all levels right now. But, Kristen McDonald will love when I say this. Like, people have gotten away from the mid-range, and they're making a mistake. like the mid-range is actually making a comeback, whether people want to admit it or not. And I think one of the areas you see it the most is at the pro game or whatever, where it's whether it's Kawhi or DeMar DeRozan, a number of guys that are really good pull-up jumpers that can take people off the bounce or whatever. So I think what we're going to see is almost like what I've always wanted, a balance where the three is a three and it's maybe a focus, but the mid-range game is not frowned upon. Now, again, I don't want to see a guy taking a mid-range shot inside the three-point line. If that case, take one step back and take a three. The other thing that we're looking at is positionalist basketball, which I'm a big fan of. Like, I never loved, like, well, you're a center, you're a power forward, you're a small forward, a shooting guard. And each one of these five positions also has five other names for each one of the positions. Oh, you're a hybrid, you do this. And to me, I just look for players. Like, if I could have five guys that could do everything, and including rebound or whatever, I'd play five guards that were tough son of a bitches that could, take people off the dribble, shoot the rock, blah, blah, blah. But one of the things I think we forgot about is the post position. And in my offense, which is a pace and space offense, we still use the post position, but it's not like you post up and wait for the ball to come. It's more of an action where you end up posting up and then you got a quick jump or something like that. So I'm interested to see how that whole positionless basketball goes to a different level. The other thing is, if you haven't realized that, spacing is huge, right? So I don't think enough people are understanding right now what spacing really is. And I remember watching the Olympics this summer, and I don't know if it was Vince Carter or whatever. And Vince Carter's a Hall of Famer, but he was like, well, they're forcing them to stop their offense way out beyond the three-point line. And the reality was, that's what they want to do because they want to have as much space as possible. And, he was wrong on that comment because I think it was Spain that was actually doing that. And that's what we're trying to do with spacing where you can actually do a lot more. And then defensively, I think you're seeing a lot of things. Everyone used to preach just man-to-man defense. I would like us to, especially at the young ages, that should be our staple defense. But you're seeing everybody, even a Coach K, who was a man-to-man defensive coach for a long time. He experimented after coaching with Jim Boeheim in the Olympics. They started to do Syracuse's 2-3 zone and things like that. So I think what's interesting is we're going to see some different type of how we defend on a pressure situation, how we defend on a zone situation. And I think everything's cyclical in a lot of ways. I think at some point in time, you're going to see us come back to maybe a little bit of some old school stuff. And then I think the biggest thing right now that a lot of people like Noah LaRoche and a lot of really good trainers are really starting to work on the cognitive aspect of basketball. Like, why do people do things the way they do? Why do they react to the certain things? And I think you're going to see that be a huge focus as we go into the next 10 years in terms of basketball. Like, we always talk about basketball IQ or not basketball IQ. And I'm loving seeing that we're actually kind of taking a look at the whole how people think, how people make. And that's why my big push, and I've been doing it for a long time before people started talking about this, is everything we base in training is about teaching decision making. Okay? Because the days of you running an offense where Johnny goes to the corner, this guy goes here, this person holds there, then he dribbles and does this.
It's our
every good defense is going to take that away. But how are you going to teach the kids to play when a defense is taken away from this, that type of thing? So I love the game of basketball. It evolves constantly. And with my fireside, I like hearing what this person's saying. Ryan Seavey, who's been on I think he talks a lot. He does a lot of training, and he's talking more on movement and how movement works. And so I think that's the exciting stuff. Now, the traditional old school basketball coach is rolling their eyes right now with half of the stuff I just said. But I would say to the guy that rolling his eyes right now, you might want to listen because this is where this is going down the road.
Well, I mean, look at the NFL. I mean, I always say this to people, and this is true. I mean, the NFL has become like a three-pointer has become, so dominant in the NBA. In the NFL, it's all about throwing the football. I mean, quarterbacks are throwing the football 35, 40 times a game on average. I mean, give or take here and there, right? And what you're seeing is you're seeing higher scoring, but you're also seeing like more package and personnel. Like the days of the middle linebacker that's out there for 3 downs, that he's a run stuffer and then he's out there for the pass is gone. And you see teams that are starting to go back to double tights and big packages and have fullbacks that can come out of the backfield and play actions, and tight ends that have, speed and space. And, it's kind of evolving back to, if you don't have those big running packages anymore, 5 years ago, who cares? A fullback was almost a dinosaur in the NFL. Now it's arguably one of your more valuable positions, especially if you're a team that, runs the ball pretty well and you can play action with fullbacks and backs that can catch the ball in the backfield. So, middle linebacker, that position's changed in the NFL. And, I named 5 middle linebackers that played 3 downs. It maybe for a super fan, they got it, but for an average fan, I mean, I have to really think, and I don't even know if I could come up with 5. So the game changes constantly, no matter what the sport is. And I'm sure a hockey guy could come on here and tell you the same thing about hockey and baseball and lacrosse and, softball and volleyball, whatever sport it is, they'll come on here and tell you. So I always find it intriguing.
But isn't that also exciting? This is what I love about sports, right?
Right.
And again, as I told you before, like, I'm not a football expert like you, but I sit in front of the TV on Sunday and I'm watching, Tom Brady pass for 52 passes today or whatever. Right. And I look at different things saying like, wow, it is exciting that things are changing. Because if the game was always the same, right, I don't know. I don't think we'd be spending every Sunday watching football if it was always the same.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why the quarterback nowadays, it's the offensive player of the year is a quarterback. The MVP is a quarterback, because that's just how valuable that position nowadays is in the NFL. Let me ask you this question. It's a little bit off topic here, but you're dedicated your life to basketball. I mean, you dedicated your life to, youth and recreation. I mean, you've been doing this all for a really long time. How much time is like Rick taking off when certain aspects of basketball, like you took a 2-month break with the Fireside, like what are you doing? Like, just talk about you as a person. Like, you're taking time off from what you're doing. What are some fun things you like to do? And just kind of, that's maybe people don't really know about you.
Yeah, I mean, to go back to your first point, so my job, I've been there 33 years. So most people leave after a few years. I've been there my whole life. It's really the only job I've ever had. And I believe that, if you find a job you love, you never work a day in your life. That's kind of my mantra. But even the jobs that you love and even passionate about basketball, like I see kids getting burnt out. I see coaches getting burnt out. I can get burnt out. I think I was early on in stress management, like in knowing when to get away. For me, like my son was a really talented basketball player. And when Hoops for Hope was over the first week of August, like I took the ball out of his hands and we went on vacation. We went bike riding. We did all of these other things because he needed a break. And quite frankly, I needed a break. So my job is so intense, my full-time job, and my passion for basketball and this culture workshop so much. Like, I need to take a break. And I do a lot of things. I'm very active. So I'm big on, kayaking. I pretty much kayak 2 to 3 times a week. I bike 2 to 3 times a week. I work out. I do a lot of writing, and that's actually a thing that I really like to do, and it kind of gets me away. And again, I end up writing about some of the stuff I'm trying to get away from, but it's also a different type of decompressing and getting away and just taking a deep breath, whether it's going to the mountains, hiking, or whatever. But I encourage anybody that's doing everything 24/7, 365, you're going to burn out, and you need to be careful of that. I have 2 grown kids. I'm divorced now. And again, I think I've learned in my later life that, maybe I should have learned some of the advice I'm giving you now a little bit earlier. And but listening to you, you got a set of twins, and I've told you, like, enjoy every minute of that. That stuff goes away. Like, when I think of Michael and Lindsay now in their 20s, I'm like, God, that went by unbelievably fast. And you got to make sure family is number one. And you got to take care of yourself. If you don't take care of yourself, it's not just burnout. Like, I see people getting ill over this. Look at how many football coaches, I just saw, what's his name, Kansas City Chiefs. He left in an ambulance tonight. And I don't know, did he have hypertension? Did something happen today? I don't know. Maybe he had a heart attack. But I think that it's so stressful. And for some of those reasons you talked about, that it's hard to be a coach now. Like, it is hard. Like, you've got to have time for yourself, and you got to be able to say, I got to step away from doing this and not feel guilty about doing it. You got to do it for yourself.
Yeah, and you hit a lot of good points. I mean, one of the last questions I ask, and I won't ask this last, I have another point that I want to bring up to you. But while we're on it, I mean, what is that your advice to young coaches out there? I typically ask people, what's their advice to young coaches? I mean, you kind of just hit upon a lot of different things there, but what is your advice to young coaches that are about to, strap in and go for this ride of whether it's at the high school level, the college level, or if they're lucky enough, the professional level? I mean, what's your advice to them as far as coming out the gate, who you are as a coach, what you should learn,
Yeah.
so on and so
I,
forth?
I think you've got to be a truth teller. I think you got to be passionate about what you're doing. You got to be willing to work hard. And in our basketball game, especially with those young guys as college assistants that aren't making money and are hustling it every day, you really got to work hard. But you also got to take care of yourself the whole thing too. I joke all the time that these coaches that come to the fall ball, like, what's their dinner? McDonald's or Wendy's on the way in? Like take care of yourself. But for the young coaches, like I want them to actually, build relationships. I keep harping on this, but this is a big pet peeve for me. Like, do it because you love it, not because, you think you need an extra job or something. Like really be passionate about it. But in the same breath, you have to have a balance in your life. Okay. So my mentee, Steve Boudreau, the head coach at Tewksbury, he helps train me. But he's the head coach now. So like he's not training with me this fall. And I had to have a conversation, and he had kind of known this, but I said, no, you're not going to see Danielle the entire winter. Like you need to be home this fall because the winter's going to be crazy, and you got to take care of your family. And you're a coach, and I bet your wife is just like everybody else. The real MVP is the wives of coaches, of what they have to put up with, the hours, the long hours, the bullshit of, you come home, you're upset because the parents made a complaint. And that's why I say don't ever forget that, significant other in your life that is your rock. And don't forget that. And don't think about it 20 years later, I wish I had done that. So that's a little bit of my advice. I want people to get into coaching. I want them to be passionate about it. But I'll be honest with you, get on the fireside chat because you got to get better also. Like there's no coach that's unbelievable. Paul Conley is probably one of the most revered high school coaches from Newton North, won state championships. He's coached at the college level. He comes on the fireside chat just wanting to learn more. And that's what you got to do. And he gets it just as much as the young kids. Chris Harvey's coached his entire life. He gets off this, and the humbleness of all of these coaches is unbelievable. But that professional development, like if we're going to say to the kids, what are you doing in the off season? I'm going to say to you, coach, what are you doing in the off season?
Right. And it's accountability. I mean, I totally agree. I mean, nowadays, I feel like sometimes younger coaches don't value that getting that education and growing. I mean, there's only so much until you start doing it. And then when you start doing it, you realize there's not a lot that because it's way more than you could ever imagine. So I love the advice. And again, having that balance. I mean, that would be my advice to young coaches out there is balance your life. Don't just become obsessed with it because then everything else in your life starts going away because people don't you don't value your time with anything else except doing that. You can't get lost in it.
Absolutely.
You
And
can't.
remember, when you stop learning, you stop growing.
That's it. And that's really important. Great advice, coach. And, I was going to ask you this question, but we were on that. So I went with that question, but this is the last thing we'll talk about before we jump into our 2-minute draw last segment. And this is probably, I wear a lot of hats. I'm a teacher. I run a summer fun program. I was a football coach for a long time, now dad. So I understand wearing a lot of hats and going around. But one of the more impressive things that research and us doing our little pre-phone interview was you are and I want to make sure I get the title right here in North Andover. You are the executive director of youth and recreation services. And I run a summer camp. And last year we shut down because of COVID. But you're one of the only places I've heard of, arguably on this planet, that was actually open all summer long, and you ran it successfully. And I think that speaks volumes of who you are, not just in the hats that you wear in the basketball world, but who you are as a leader, who you are as a director, who you are as people look to you for guidance, and your advice means a lot. Talk about that, because to me that's like incredible, because nobody knew what COVID was at certain points, and here you are. I'm sure nervous every day, but you did it.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, as much as I'm passionate about basketball, my first love is the youth center in North Andover. It's something I've dedicated 30 years of my life. I started it from scratch. I was hired without a job description, and they told me figure out how to do with kids in North Andover. So we built this department, and then we ended up building a beautiful youth center that we opened up in 2000, and it's unbelievable. We service 3,500 kids a year, and I've done a lot of great things in that job. But the greatest professional thing I ever did was when the world shut down last March, and we were ready because we do our stuff well in advance. We had our plan for a summer, and I basically went to my superiors, the town manager of North Andover, and said, I know you can't give me the yes on this now, but I have a plan. I want to do it. I got to sell it to you. We can do it. So they kind of held me at bay a little bit until the restrictions kind of said, and then I had to present to the town, the health department, my board of directors, and basically everybody thought I was absolutely crazy. Like, what are you doing? I had peers that basically said, hey, dude, like, why don't you do what the rest of us and take the summer off? Like, it'll be easier for you. And that's not kind of how I'm built. It's all about the kids in North Andover and my, you know, professionally with how I treat this. So I came up with a bulletproof plan. When I say bulletproof, who knows what the first kid got, the kid got COVID would get shut down. But we came up with a plan, you know, utilizing, you know, restrictions and masks and, you know, cohorts and things that become common names to us now. But a year ago, everyone was like crazy. And we were actually able to operate the whole summer without one COVID positive case. So I took that positivity and I went back to the town and said, now I want to reopen the youth center in the school year in September. And we were actually able to go the entire year without one closure. Now, during the school year, we had COVID positive cases, but due to an amazing tracking and tracing program we put into place, it never shut the youth center down. Certain kids were quarantined. I had staff that had to be quarantined. And then we started the cycle again this summer, and we had another successful summer. The last 2 weeks, I had to institute masks again because I work with kids that are unvaccinated because of age, and we were getting more and more kids that were getting positive in August, but we actually were able to finish the summer. It is by far the greatest professional thing I've ever done, and I couldn't have done it myself. I have an amazing staff. I have an amazing support system in the community with the kids, the parents, the town manager, the health department. But I've gone on like a talking tour because people want to know, like, how did you do it? And I don't think I had a bulletproof plan in terms of like everything in place. What I did have more than anybody else, I wasn't afraid of failing, right? And this is what I would say to coaches too. Like it could have been shut down. You talk about your summer program that was shut down. I was prepared for that, but at least I could look in the mirror and say, I tried, right? And the more it became successful, but I'll be honest with you, the summer of 2020, I did not sleep, Coach, because every day I was wondering who was going to get COVID or how we were going to track and trace it. So when that August came around, when you know I like to take August off, I like passed out in August and no one could find me for a couple of weeks because I just needed to recharge because what we had done was unbelievable.
I mean, no one's done it. No one did it. No one did it.
And it was really good. We were recognized, obviously, by our community, but the State House recognized us, the State Senate, the State House of Representatives. We had a number of national organizations. People from Minnesota were calling me like, well, how did you do this? So it was a great thing. The one thing I'll take away from it, and I would say this to even all of our coaches, is, you know, you can't let fear rule you, right? You gotta basically do what you think's right. And I didn't wing this. I had a good plan. I put things in place, but there was a lot of stress to it. And the end of the day, as I can say, at least I tried, at least my staff tried, and we were successful. So quite frankly, in the world of youth services, we are the toast of the town. We are looked at as unbelievably successful. And I look at that youth center we built, the Recplex we built, the Stevens Pond we built, all wonderful things. But I want to be remembered as the guy that didn't close the youth center during a global pandemic.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, there's been many great accomplishments and things that you continue to do. But to me, that was just because I understand that world and I understand how difficult that was. And, you know, we had a plan, but at the end of the day, I don't think anybody really wanted to roll the dice on it. And, you know, this past summer we had 0 COVID cases. And, yeah, good for you. Good for you. I think that
Thank you.
that's really cool. And you should hang your hat on that for sure. Cause it's scary for those that don't understand that. And kids we had to wear masks indoors. We didn't have to wear them outside. There was a lot we had to do with wiping tables down and keeping things clean and keeping kids separated. I mean, it's not easy. So for you to do that in a time period in this country that you pretty much heard something different daily about COVID at one point and in the summer, and people were out and about living life like there was, it was good weather and nothing was going on. So it was tricky. It was definitely really tricky. And I give you a lot of credit for that. And with that being said, we're going to jump into the last segment of our show today. It's called our 2-minute drill. So I just fire rapid fire questions. Coaches give me great feedback on this. 1 or 2 word answers. I get to throw a challenge flag if I want to hear something a little bit more, and vice versa. You get to do the same thing if you want to explain something a little bit more. So I always give the coach an opportunity to explain themselves. So let me get this all set up, and here we go. What's a song, coach, that still gets you pretty amped up before a big game or before a big class or whatever?
All right, so most people who know me really well, I am probably the greatest Bruce Springsteen fan. So anything that's Springsteen, but the song Badlands, where it's got a line where "Ain't no sin to be glad you're alive." I mean, that juices me up right now. Let's go play right now. So yeah, definitely Badlands from Bruce Springsteen.
All right. Who do you think the best basketball player right now currently in the NBA is?
So it's interesting because I think LeBron gets a lot of crap. LeBron, I'm a Michael Jordan person, greatest player ever. Is LeBron number 2? I can make a case for it, but what a player Kevin Durant is. So you know what? I think Kevin Durant's the best player in the NBA.
All right. I like that. I like that a lot. Next week, Brady versus Belichick. Who's winning the game? A little bit away from basketball here, but just curious of your answer.
Yeah, I mean, I follow Brady just because I'm just amazed by him. And I think Bill Belichick, I mean, he's taking a lot of crap right now. Bill Belichick is a savant. I'm a Greg Popovich idol, and he's in the same mold as that. I do think that he's in a tough situation. I think Mac's not quite ready yet. I don't think the team is as good as I think people thought they were 3 weeks ago. And again, it looks like Brady lost today. So I think he's coming in with a vengeance. I think they're going to put up some points. I think Boston's going to be pretty psyched to have him and Gronk back. So I'm going Tampa Bay 31, Patriots 17.
I love it. And we got a score. This is great. You're the first coach to even throw a score in there. So we've been asking this question for months, and we're pretty excited to start clipping it all together and putting it on our page really soon. So this was fun. What's the most important position in basketball right now, you would say, at any level?
So the position, again, you're talking to a guy that believes in positionalist basketball, but I still believe your floor general, you call him a point guard, the guy that has to basically operate what you're trying to do, be the coach of the floor. At the end of the day, it's like your quarterback that you relate to in basketball. I'm a guy that has a great relationship with my point guards, and we go as far as our point guard's going to make us go. And that's usually just getting us into our offense and making us.
All right, cool. And the last question I'll ask you here, Coach, and it goes via fireside chats a little bit. You've named some pretty well-established, pretty good coaches that go to those fireside chats. Give you an opportunity to maybe give a plug to one young coach on there, or new head coach on there that you've seen on there week after week that's a little impressive that maybe we should be keeping an eye out maybe for the future of having on this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, and I can mention all of the ones I just mentioned ahead of time. I'm going to go with I'm going to go 2 because so one of them I'm going to give a shout out to my mentee, Steve Boudreau. He was a finalist for the Central Catholic job. He was a finalist for the Masco job, and then he got the Tewksbury job, which is a tough place to win. It's a small community and a tough league. But his ability to relate to kids, his relationship building, his culture building. He is going to be a very good coach for a very long time. And the second guy is a guy that I don't think people give enough credit to. That's Stevie Matthews down at Newton South. Stevie was a tremendous college basketball player. He's another guy that's a great shooter, so he teaches a lot of shooting. But I like what he's done down at Newton South, and I don't think he gets enough props as a coach. He applied for a lot of different jobs that I was aware of. And he finally, he got a job. I think he was at Matignon. But Newton South is a great. He's cross town from Paul Conley, and I think they're going to have a nice little rivalry going. But Steve Matthews, another great coach.
Yeah, awesome. All right, Coach. Well, listen, you survived the 2-minute drill. And I want to thank you for coming on here today because this has been a true education for me. I mean, I've been doing this for, over a year. September 18th was our year mark. And I have a notebook that is just full of things from all different sports, from program building to X's and O's to just sayings or quotes that coaches have said over the years. And there were a few times that I was typing here on the side a little bit, just a few things that you were saying or things that you mentioned about building a program and skill set and things you're working on. And obviously running a summer program is something I would love to pick your brain about in the future as well. But
Absolutely.
I think what you do for coaches and especially your fireside chats alone, in going to programs and really asking those questions to get kids to, emotionally buy into their programs. I think what you're doing is amazing. I think there needs to be more people out there like you that help these coaches and educate these programs and make, people really understand the love there is for a sport, and making kids who sometimes forget because they're playing so much sport all the time. It's nonstop that they sometimes forget why they love it or why they play it or why it means so much to them. And I think doing that and all the other stuff that you do is just, it's amazing to open their eyes back up a little bit.
Well, if I could just throw one other thing for down the road, you might want to take a look at this. So I've been actually meeting with athletic directors and principals, because people sometimes forget principals have a lot to say in an athletic department. And one of my big pushes, and I haven't gotten a ton of leverage on it yet, but mentoring programs, you just brought it up. I think every athletic program should be like every academic program. Like, we have mentors for the math teacher. How about mentors for the athletic coaches, especially young coaches that may not know the community, may not know, the lay of the land, may not know our parents, different things like that. But like, mentoring programs is the way to go. And I like to see that more in the athletic department. And if we had mentoring programs, we'd have a lot less kids not wanting to be coaches and not thinking about failing.
I agree. I think it's like that. I'm in the education world. It's the same thing. It's sometimes a shame that they don't have mentoring programs to build administrators as well, and so on. So I totally agree with you. I think that's something that would be important. I know money, kind of is the biggest factor of all, but it's worth investing your money in for sure. So again, I want to thank you. I think you've brought a lot to the table. I've been excited to have you on. I know you have a huge following. You do a lot of great things. So thanks for taking the time tonight. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me. Your podcast is great. Loving to listen to this when it comes out live. But again, I'm a weekly follower because I like what you do, and I like where you're delving into different things, and it's not the same every week. And again, we all got to learn. We all got to be curious. And, I love listening to your football coaches on there and listening to you talk, because I pick up something with that. So best of luck with your podcast. Keep doing it. I think some people end up, not keeping their podcast going. I'm a podcast listener, so I see what you're doing has everything, so much growth potential.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Up until this summer, I mean, we were weekly, and then the summer with work and traveling and being dad and being a good husband and all that, you take time off to be with your family. So you do every other week. And, but yeah, we're just about at 50 episodes, from starting last September. So we didn't miss much time really. And, like, the future's bright. We have so many fun things coming up. We have interns that are going to be working for us, the high school kids that reached out to us that want to be a part of this. So, the sky's the limit for us, and we have a lot of fun ideas. So, it's coaches like you guys that make it really easy to have this podcast, but to also be able to go to games and see things live and watch things unfold and happen. It's cool. And being a network to connect coaches has been a lot of fun too. So,
well, keep doing it, and make sure you tell your wife you love her and give those two twins a kiss, because family is number one. Don't forget that.
I agree. Trust me, every day. I know it every day. So, again, thanks for coming on from Beyond Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Petrellis. Till next time.